Welcome, folks. In this session, we're going to dive into a training topic with our speaker today is Dave Vanderbloemen. And the topic is on predicting impacts and proactive planning. We're going to define what that means, but the big idea is how we can use data from the past to predict impacts and so forth in the future. And so it's going to be focused on kind of electric sector, but this principles apply to any sector. So we will be drawing that out today. On the phone with me today is Dave Vanderbloemen. Dave was a 30-plus year Dominion Energy, retired, now has his own consulting firm, very involved with the Fleet Response Working Group of the All Hazards Consortium, which is a nationwide work group that works on a number of things on the electric sector, supply chain movement, so forth. And in addition to that is John Molnar. John runs the program office for the All Hazards Consortium. And John and I work together with Dave on a number of topics. We're going to get into this one, but there are going to be more coming in the future. So before we jump into too much of the detail here, I'm going to have Dave introduce himself and a little bit of his background, and then we can dive into the content. So Dave, why don't you take a minute and just tell a little bit about your background, your story a little bit, so people can get an idea of who you are and where you came from.
Sure. Good morning, Tom. Good morning, John. As Tom mentioned, my name is Dave Vanderbloemen. I retired from Dominion Energy in 2019. I was employed there for 42 years to the date. I mean, I started on October 31st, 1977, and retired October 31st in 2019.
Wow, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah. I made it a full 42 years. In that time, I held a variety of positions. I started out about as low level as you can, entry level as you can. I started out as a groundman in construction. When I dropped out of college to try to make a little bit more money to get married to my high school sweetheart, which I'm happy to say still married to. I tried to get into the business office, but there were no openings there. But tried to leverage what I was going to school for, which was computer science and business administration. But I got a job in the construction department, and I enjoyed what I was doing there. And I was lucky enough to get awarded a position as a lineman trainee. So I got out of the trenches of being a groundman and moved up into the lineman ranks. I did that for 8 years, and I decided I wanted to do a little bit more with my career there. Since it was more now than a job, it looked like something I could do for a while. And I went into, I've done a ton of different things. I was an emergency dispatcher. I was a service representative where I designed projects for residential, commercial, industrial customers. I promoted into a supervisory rank. That was an operations supervisor, a construction supervisor. I held numerous different manager positions, general manager positions. In the last 12 years of my career, though, I spent as in the director role. So starting off as a groundman and moving up to director, I was director of local operations, which is 35 local offices, the metering group, privatization, network operations. Did that for 5 years. And then in 2007, I was promoted to the director of regional operations centers and emergency preparedness, where I served the rest of my career. And in that position, I served as in that role was part of one of my jobs was the incident commander for both on and off property weather events that would require extended restoration. So as incident commander, I led a team of extremely competent and experienced members, and together we developed, communicated, implemented responses to a variety of different events: hurricanes, ice storms, derechos. One event, which more recent, was putting together a response plan, an 82-person contingent that deployed offshore to Puerto Rico in response to Hurricane Maria. I also served in a lot of.
Dave, for those who don't understand, what's a derecho?
A derecho is a straight line wind event that extends for a long geographical area. But it comes through fairly quickly, but a straight line, and the winds can be as powerful as a hurricane. They could be up in excess of 75, 80, 90 miles an hour, but they wreak total devastation. It's kind of like seeing a lava flow go through. I mean, it knocks down everything in its path.
Yeah.
They're hard to predict. Matter of fact, the one that hit us, several of my peers were impacted earlier than me, and I was fortunate to have 2 meteorologists on staff that were telling us that nothing to worry about when it hits it was coming from the west to the east. When it hits the Blue Ridge Mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, that should block it off, die down, and by the time we got into the bulk of our service territory, it wouldn't be anything. Well, it ended up being our 3rd worst event. Within no time, we had 600,000-700,000 customers out of lights, and we spent the next week restoring power. So
Yeah, I remember in Columbia, Maryland, where I live, that thing blew through here so fast. It was sunny skies and it was dark. I thought it was a tornado blowing through, and I mean everything went down. I couldn't believe the wind. I never heard of a derecho before, so I learned.
I heard of it because a good friend of mine watches nothing but the Weather Channel, and I wasn't before I became the director of the regional operations centers. My motto used to be for never worry about anything you can't change. So I didn't really care about the weather. When it hit, I would respond to it. However, when you become the director of the regional operations center emergency preparedness, you got to change your thought pattern a little bit. You've got to prepare for the weather. You've got to be a little bit more insightful. You just can't wait for things to happen.
Yeah.
Just a little bit to finish out a little bit more about me and my career. In my role as a director, I served in several trade associations leadership positions. I was on a major participant in the Southeast Electric Exchange. I was a second alternate on the Mutual Assistance Committee. That group with the SEE, Southeast Electric Exchange, managed a response, an industry response to events. If you were getting hit and didn't have enough resources, then your peers in that organization would rally around and send you the resources that you need. And it was really at a at-cost basis. Nobody did it for a profit, and pretty unique philosophy. I think it's second to none. I don't think any other industry does what the electric industry does as far as mutual assistance. I also served on Edison Electric Institute's Mutual Assistance Committee. I was an executive member of that committee. And on the Association of Edison Illuminating Companies, AEIC, which is another trade organization, just the oldest trade organization, as a matter of fact, for electric utilities. Obviously, with the name Edison, that probably gives a hint to that. On that association, I was the co-chair of the technology team for best practices. And unlike the Southeast Electric Exchange, which was really more of the Southeast utilities, AEIC was across the continent. And it had more than just IOUs. We had co-ops, municipalities, other utilities that belong to that. And in that group, we looked at technology that could be used and leveraged across the industry to better respond and bring more consistency to the industry. So just as you can tell, in my 42 years, my vast portion of my career has been focused on emergency response and helping my neighbors in my community and even outside of my community, but helping folks get back to normal and when an emergency hits. And best thing you do if you're in utility is get the lights back on, because once the lights are on, everything else seems to come back to normal.
Right. And Dave, this topic is interesting. You told me one time you learned this the hard way. What drove you to this topic? Why is this important for not just electric sector, but really for any sector, emergency managers to get their arms around? What is it about this that you kind of wish to communicate to the folks?
Well, for mutual assistance or for any kind of emergency response, it's never just one person. It's never just one organization. It's never just one time. It's not just. I remember one of our taglines used to be 2 men in a bucket truck. That was it. When people think about power being out, they think about the lineman in the bucket truck getting the lights back out. But in reality, those folks and truck now was one. You rely heavily on what they do, but they would be sitting there idle if it weren't for the folks that sit behind the scenes that do the damage assessment, that do the work packaging, that do the logistics, that take care of getting you fed, that get the fuel for your trucks, put your projects together, put the communication strategy together, get you where you need to be to get the lights back on. And when I got promoted to the manager of the Northwest Regional Operations Center, so Dominion Energy has had 3 regional operations centers geographically located. My first big role in emergency response was the manager of the Northwest Operating Center. I got that position in 2003. 2003, and I believe it's still to date, we got hit by the biggest hurricane that our system had ever seen, Hurricane Isabel. I was in that role for maybe a month. I'd been a manager of a local office. Like I said, I'd held a lot of positions. I've done everything from climb poles to put wire back up to working in a local office, putting work packages together. I knew what each piece was, but I didn't realize how important it was for everybody that's involved to know not only what they do, but what the people next to them do and how each one of them work together to build that cohesive team that does emergency response. But when I walked into that role in the Northwest Operating Center and Isabel hit, I'm sitting around the table and I'm thinking, darn, 2/3 of our customers are out of lights and I'm responsible for getting back on. 1, I'm sitting around a bunch of new people. 2, I know the process of down in the field and the trenches, but I don't know how it works in that operating center. I got an idea, and there's no manual, there is no book. It's all done by people that have done it for a million years, right? And in my group, it was the Craig Ivies, the Ed Baines, the Joe Woomers. These guys have been there, done that, learned it, passed down from generation to generation. Here I am, and I didn't have the benefit of working there for 4, 5, 6 months, 7 months, and seeing a bunch of little storms. I just got the mother of all storms, and here I am. Now we did a great job. Well, we, not me, but our team did. But in my mind, I said, I'm not going to put myself through this again. I started working with my groups to start documenting, building standard operating procedures, documenting and putting together a governance structure so that when I moved on, which I knew I would because I was either going to get promoted or fired, one of the two. I'd flip a coin. But I didn't want to leave that next person in that same position when they got in that job. I want to make sure that they had something they could go back to and say, well, this is how it's done. So that was my aha moment.
Right. Very good. Very good.